I never thought my life would take the kind of turn that it did when Jessica first stepped into it. Up until that point, I had always carried my secret close to my chest, buried under layers of guilt and uncertainty. There were these moments, small and fleeting, when I would catch my reflection in the mirror and imagine something softer, something more delicate staring back at me. I couldn't describe it to anyone. I couldn't even put it into words myself. All I knew was that there was this longing, like an itch I could never quite scratch, and it whispered to me when the world was quiet. Jessica wasn't just another person in my life. She was my cousin, though much older and far more worldly than me. She had this air about her, this way of commanding attention without ever needing to raise her voice. People leaned in when she spoke. I had always admired her, but also feared what she might think if she ever discovered the things I kept locked away. Because she noticed everything, and she didn't let much slip past her. It happened one evening after dinner at Aunt Martha's house. I had gone upstairs to fetch something from my bag, and Jessica followed me without a word. When I turned around, she was standing there in the doorway with that knowing smile of hers. My heart thudded in my chest because I knew she had seen the edge of something I'd been hiding in my bag, something that didn't belong in the world of the boy everyone thought I was. It was a simple ribbon, pale pink and frayed at the edges, but it was enough. "Interesting choice," she said softly, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. I wanted to shrink into the floor. My throat tightened as if the ribbon itself had betrayed me. I tried to stammer an excuse, but Jessica only tilted her head. "You don't have to explain. Not to me." Her tone was calm, but her eyes, oh, they pierced through every wall I had built. For the first time, I felt like someone truly saw me, and that realization was terrifying. But it was also the first spark of something I didn't yet understand, something that would eventually change everything. That night, Jessica didn't scold me, didn't laugh, didn't make me feel small. Instead, she sat me down on the bed and asked a simple question. "Have you ever wanted to see what it feels like to really explore this side of yourself?" My lips trembled as I whispered the faintest yes. Jessica's smile widened, but it wasn't cruel. It was almost tender, as if she had been waiting for me to admit it. "Then maybe," she said, leaning closer, "it's time we stopped pretending." I didn't realize then what her words meant, or how far she was willing to go to guide me. All I knew was that my world had shifted, and there was no turning back. The next morning, I woke up still replaying Jessica's words in my mind. "It's time we stopped pretending." They rang like church bells in my ears, both frightening and comforting at the same time. At breakfast, I sat across from her at Aunt Martha's long oak table, pushing scrambled eggs around my plate while trying not to meet her gaze. But Jessica was never one to let things slide. Every so often, she would glance up at me with that same knowing smile, and my cheeks would burn. After the dishes were cleared, she beckoned me into the sunroom where Aunt Martha was knitting, her fingers moving gracefully over soft pastel yarn. Aunt Martha looked up, and for a moment, I thought Jessica might reveal my secret. My chest tightened, but instead, she spoke in that silky, confident tone. "Auntie, I think it's about time we let our dear one explore a gentler side. Don't you agree?" I froze. My heart skipped, then hammered. Did she mean me? Surely Aunt Martha didn't know. Surely this was just a test, a cruel trick, or maybe I was hearing it wrong. But Aunt Martha's expression softened, and a small smile tugged at her lips. "I've been waiting for you to bring it up, Jessica," she said quietly, as if this was no surprise at all. I could hardly breathe. My secret world, the one I had fought to keep hidden, was no longer mine alone. Yet instead of scorn, I was met with acceptance. Aunt Martha placed her knitting aside, stood, and walked over to me. She rested her hand gently on my shoulder. "There's no shame in wanting softness," she said. "In fact, I think it suits you more than you realize." Tears stung my eyes. I wanted to argue, to deny it all, but the words caught in my throat. And deep down, I knew she was right. Jessica leaned forward, her voice a quiet melody. "I told you, you don't have to pretend anymore. Martha and I will guide you, but you'll have to trust us." The room seemed to spin around me. Trust them? With this? With the most fragile part of me that I'd guarded for so long? But as I looked into their faces, I saw no ridicule, no judgment, only a strange mix of certainty and care. Aunt Martha lifted her chin slightly. If you want to begin, we'll start gently. One step at a time. You'll learn to let go of the fear. You'll learn what it means to be seen as who you truly are. My lips parted, and though my voice was no more than a whisper, I said it. I want to. The air shifted immediately. Jessica clapped her hands softly, almost in delight, while Aunt Martha's hand gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Good, Jessica murmured, because once we start, there's no turning back. And I promise you, it will be the most beautiful journey of your life. I didn't know what awaited me, but something inside me, a fragile, trembling flame, was ready to be nurtured. That afternoon, Jessica took me upstairs to the guest room where I usually stayed when visiting Aunt Martha. The room had always felt plain. White walls, a small wooden dresser, and a neatly made bed with a quilt that smelled faintly of lavender. But when I stepped inside this time, I noticed the atmosphere had shifted, as if Jessica had already claimed it for something else. She closed the door behind us, locking it with a soft click that made my heart race. On the bed sat a box I had never seen before, wrapped in delicate floral paper with a satin bow tied neatly on top. My stomach flipped as Jessica crossed the room and patted the box like it was some treasured secret waiting to be uncovered. This, she said, her voice laced with excitement, is the beginning. I stared, unable to move closer, my body caught between anticipation and fear. What's in it? I asked, though part of me already knew. Jessica tilted her head, smiling knowingly. Something that will help you see yourself as you were always meant to be. With careful hands, she untied the bow and peeled back the paper, revealing a pastel pink dress nestled inside. The fabric shimmered faintly under the light, soft and frilly with lace trimming the collar and sleeves. My breath caught. It wasn't just any dress, it was delicate, innocent, almost childlike in its sweetness. I stepped closer, mesmerized. My fingers hovered above the fabric, but didn't dare touch. Jessica noticed. Go on, she encouraged softly. Feel it. This is yours now. The material was lighter than I expected, smooth like water slipping over skin. I closed my eyes for a moment, imagining myself wrapped in it, but shame quickly followed the thought. I can't. What if someone sees? I whispered, my voice trembling. Jessica placed a steadying hand under my chin, lifting my face so I couldn't look away from her. The only people who matter are the ones who already know. Me. Aunt Martha. No one else has to. For now, this world is safe. Her certainty calmed me, though my nerves still fluttered wildly. She lifted the dress out of the box and held it against me, gauging the fit. Perfect, she said with satisfaction. Now let's see the real you. My hands shook as I took the dress. Changing into it felt like stepping across a line I could never uncross. My old clothes pooled on the floor, leaving me bare and vulnerable until I slipped the soft garment over my head. The lace brushed my skin, sending shivers through me, and when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The boyish edges of me seemed to blur away, replaced by someone gentler, more fragile, almost luminous. My throat tightened and tears prickled my eyes again, not from sadness, but from the strange relief of finally seeing even a glimpse of the person I had longed to be. Jessica stood behind me, her hands resting lightly on my shoulders. There, she whispered. Now you understand. I nodded, unable to speak, because the truth was undeniable. For the first time, I felt alive. Standing there in front of the mirror, I felt as though I had slipped into another life, one that had always been hidden, just out of reach. The frills, the delicate bow tied neatly at the waist, the soft way the skirt swayed when I shifted, it was overwhelming in the gentlest way. My reflection no longer looked like a stranger. It looked like a secret self I had been chasing without even realizing. Jessica's gaze in the mirror was steady, proud. She brushed a strand of hair away from my forehead, tucking it behind my ear with a tenderness that made my knees weak. "See how natural this feels?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. She already knew the answer. I wanted to deny it, to resist, but the truth escaped my lips before I could stop it. "Yes, that feels right." Her smile widened. "Then you're ready for the next step." A knock sounded at the door, gentle but firm. My heart leapt in panic, but Jessica didn't flinch. She opened the door, and there stood Aunt Martha, holding a small wicker basket lined with fabric. Her eyes landed on me, dressed in the pink frills, and instead of surprise, she simply nodded as though this was exactly what she had expected to see. "Lovely," Aunt Martha said, her voice warm. "You've always had the heart for it. Now it's only catching up on the outside." She placed the basket on the bed and began taking items out: hairbrushes, ribbons, a powder puff, and even a pair of shiny white shoes with little bows. My head spun. It was as if they had been preparing for this moment long before I had ever whispered my secret aloud. Jessica guided me to sit at the edge of the bed, smoothing the skirt over my lap as Aunt Martha set the shoes gently at my feet. "Try them," she urged softly. I slid my feet inside, the glossy shoes fitting snugly, completing the look. When I glanced in the mirror again, I saw not just a boy in a dress, but something more, something truer, though I couldn't yet put it into words. Aunt Martha brushed my hair with steady strokes, humming a quiet tune, while Jessica tied a ribbon into a neat bow. My reflection softened with each touch, as though they were brushing away the layers of fear and shame I had worn for years. When they were finished, Jessica turned me to face them fully. "This," she said with quiet finality, "is the beginning of your transformation. You are no longer hiding." My lips trembled, and a tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. Aunt Martha cupped my face, her thumb brushing the tear away. "Crying is good, darling," she whispered. "It means your heart is opening." And in that moment, surrounded by lace, ribbons, and love I had never expected to receive, I felt something stir deep inside me. Something that whispered, "You are finally becoming who you were meant to be." The rest of that day passed in a blur, though every detail etched itself into my memory like it was stitched into fabric. Aunt Martha insisted we stay inside, away from any wandering eyes, so I could take my first steps in this new skin without fear. Jessica flitted about the room, adjusting ribbons here, smoothing fabric there, while Aunt Martha moved with deliberate calm, always watching me with eyes that seemed to see more than I dared to admit. At first, I felt awkward moving around in the dress. The swish of the skirt against my legs startled me, the snug shoes made me walk differently, and the bow tugged gently at my hair whenever I turned too quickly. But soon, what had felt foreign began to feel natural, as if my body had always been waiting for this rhythm. Jessica handed me a small hand mirror and asked, "What do you see?" I stared, hesitant. The reflection was still mine, but softer, brighter. "I see someone I don't recognize," I admitted. "Not someone you don't recognize," Jessica corrected, kneeling so her eyes were level with mine. "Someone you've always been but never allowed yourself to meet." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. Later, Aunt Martha brought me downstairs for tea, as though to prove there was nothing shameful about what I wore. The old house, with its lace curtains and porcelain teacups, suddenly felt like it had been waiting for this moment too. I sat at the table, smoothing my skirt nervously, but Aunt Martha only poured me tea with a gentle smile. "Hold the cup with 2 hands," she instructed kindly. "Grace is in the little details." Jessica laughed softly, teasing, "Don't overwhelm them, Auntie. One lesson at a time." But I followed Aunt Martha's instructions, and the way she nodded approvingly filled me with a quiet pride. As the sun began to set, I realized I hadn't once thought about being discovered. My worries had been replaced with a strange peace, a fragile joy that grew each time Jessica or Aunt Martha looked at me without judgment. That evening, before bed, Jessica sat beside me and whispered, "You're going to have moments where you doubt this, where fear claws at you again. But remember today. Remember how it felt to breathe without hiding." I nodded, clutching her words tightly. And as I drifted off to sleep, still in the softness of my new attire, I felt lighter than I ever had before, like the weight of all my secrets had finally begun to lift. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the lace curtains, painting the room in soft golden tones. I stirred awake to find the dress carefully hung on the wardrobe door, as if waiting for me. For a fleeting moment, I thought it had all been a dream. The ribbons, the shoes, the way Jessica and Aunt Martha had looked at me without judgment. But the dress was real, and so was the flutter in my chest that urged me to wear it again. Jessica appeared soon after, her knock light and playful before she breezed into the room. She was carrying a small box, slimmer than the one from yesterday, and her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Ready for another step?" she asked. I swallowed hard, still caught between eagerness and nerves. "Another step?" She set the box on the bed and opened it, revealing layers of soft fabric folded neatly inside, petticoats, bloomers, and pastel tights. My face burned, and I looked at her with wide eyes. "You expect me to wear all of that?" Jessica laughed gently, not unkindly. "Expect? No. Invite? Yes. These aren't just clothes, sweetheart. They're tools to help you shed what you think you should be and embrace what you are becoming." I stared at the delicate garments, my heart thudding. There was something undeniably intimidating about them, yet also comforting, like they promised a kind of safety I had never felt before. Slowly, I nodded. "I'll try." Jessica clapped her hands softly. "That's all I ask." She helped me layer the pieces one by one. The tights hugged snugly against my legs, smoothing away edges I had always felt awkward about. The bloomers, frilly and soft, added a strange sweetness I couldn't ignore. Then the petticoat swished as it settled, giving volume to the dress when I put it on again. By the time I looked in the mirror, the figure staring back at me seemed even further removed from the boy I had once seen. Aunt Martha entered just then, carrying a tray with breakfast. Her eyes softened when she saw me fully dressed. "Now that," she said warmly, "is the picture of innocence." Her words wrapped around me like a blanket, and I felt a lump form in my throat. Innocence. It wasn't a word I had ever associated with myself, but hearing it now, in this context, it felt like a blessing. Over breakfast, Aunt Martha explained in her patient way, "Transformation isn't only about what you wear. It's about how you carry yourself, how you allow the world to see you. Every detail matters. The way you sit, the way you speak, the way you smile without hiding." Jessica leaned in, her grin playful. "So, Annie wants to give you lessons. Think of it as finishing school, just for you." I blushed furiously, but didn't protest. Deep down, I knew they were right. Clothes could shape the outside, but there was more work to be done inside. And though I was terrified of what lay ahead, part of me longed for it. Longed to be guided, molded, and nurtured into someone new. That morning, as I sipped tea with both hands like Aunt Martha had shown me, I realized something profound. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting myself. The lessons began that very afternoon. Aunt Martha insisted that transformation was as much about discipline as it was about softness, and she seemed determined to instill both in me. She cleared the sitting room, laying out a small cushion on the floor where she directed me to kneel. "Posture," she said firmly but kindly, adjusting my shoulders until my back was straight and my chin gently lifted. "Grace comes from presence. You must hold yourself as though you deserve to be seen." At first, the position felt stiff and unnatural. My legs ached, my back tensed, and I wanted to slouch like I always had. But Aunt Martha's steady hand on my shoulder kept me upright, and Jessica's soft encouragement, "You look beautiful already, don't give in now," pushed me to endure. Then came the voice. Aunt Martha handed me a small book of poems and asked me to read aloud. My voice cracked at first, sounding harsh and awkward, but she stopped me gently. "Slow down. Let the words float like feathers. You don't need to force them." I tried again, this time softening my tone, letting the syllables roll more delicately. Jessica's smile widened as she listened. "See? It's not about pretending. It's about unlocking what was always inside." Each correction, each word of praise felt like chiseling away at some rough stone I had carried within me for years. Later, Jessica introduced something she called practice time. She led me upstairs to the full-length mirror and instructed me to walk slowly back and forth, holding the skirt of my dress just so, balancing a small cushion on my head. I felt ridiculous at first, wobbling and nearly dropping it more than once. But Jessica clapped her hands each time I succeeded, laughing with delight rather than mocking me. "You're learning to glide," she said. "Not stomp. Feel the ground, but float above it." By evening, exhaustion had set in, yet it wasn't the heavy kind that dragged me down. It was the soft fatigue of progress, the kind that left me glowing with pride. When I collapsed onto my bed, still dressed in layers of lace and ribbons, I found myself smiling without realizing. That night, Jessica came to check on me before I slept. She tucked the quilt around me like I was someone precious, and her voice softened as she whispered, "I'm proud of you. Aunt Martha is too. But most importantly, you should be proud of yourself." For a long moment, I lay there in silence, the weight of her words settling deep into my chest. And for the first time in my life, I truly was proud. Not of who I pretended to be, but of who I was becoming. The following morning, I awoke to the sound of Aunt Martha's soft humming drifting from the hallway. When I stepped out of my room, she was waiting with a folded bundle in her arms. Unlike the frilly pink dress from before, this outfit was lighter, a pale blue pinafore with white trimming, paired with knee-high socks and a delicate bow for my hair. She held it out with a smile. "Every day brings a new expression. Yesterday you were sweet and delicate. Today, perhaps playful and innocent." I took the clothes carefully, feeling their weight in my hands. Each fabric, each color seemed to paint a different piece of me, as though my identity was being woven one outfit at a time. I slipped into the pinafore, tied the bow, and pulled up the socks. When I turned to the mirror, the effect was different, yet just as powerful. The person staring back looked younger somehow, softer still, like a page out of a storybook. Jessica appeared soon after and let out a small cheer. "Adorable." "Oh, Auntie, don't you think they've bloomed overnight?" Aunt Martha nodded approvingly. "Yes. They are learning to let go." That day, instead of lessons inside, they led me out into the garden. My heart pounded with nerves. What if the neighbors saw? But the tall hedges shielded us, and the air outside was fresh and calming. Jessica spread a blanket beneath the old oak tree, and Aunt Martha placed a basket of biscuits and lemonade on top. It felt almost like a tea party, the kind I had only read about as a child but never imagined myself part of. Jessica had me practice small gestures, lifting a cup, brushing crumbs away neatly, folding my hands in my lap when I wasn't eating. Every detail was deliberate, every movement a lesson. And yet, sitting there in the soft blue dress, sipping lemonade while the sun dappled through the leaves, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I felt like I belonged. At one point, Jessica leaned close and whispered, "Doesn't it feel like you've stepped into a story you were always meant to live?" I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "It feels like I'm finally breathing." Aunt Martha heard me and reached across the blanket to pat my hand. "That's the beauty of transformation. It doesn't erase who you were. It reveals who you truly are." The rest of the afternoon was filled with laughter, small corrections, and moments where I caught myself smiling so freely it startled me. By the time we returned inside, the fear that had once clung so tightly to me seemed to have loosened. That evening, as I laid out the blue dress carefully to wear again tomorrow, I realized something quietly thrilling. I no longer dreaded what I would see in the mirror. I looked forward to it. The days that followed slipped into a rhythm, each one carrying me further from who I thought I was and closer to who I was becoming. Morning always began with Aunt Martha's quiet knock and a freshly chosen outfit laid carefully across the bed. Some days it was a soft pastel dress, others a romper with lace trimming or a pinafore that brought a sense of childlike ease. With each garment, she would say, "Today you'll learn a new piece of yourself." And every time I believed her a little more. Jessica took charge of the practical lessons. She had me practice speaking softly, smiling without forcing it, and even writing with a gentler hand. "Your words should look as delicate as you feel inside," she explained, handing me a notebook filled with pages where my shaky cursive slowly transformed into graceful loops. Aunt Martha focused on presence. She corrected how I sat, never slouched, always with hands folded neatly in my lap, and how I held my teacup, spoon, or even a simple handkerchief. Every gesture says something, she reminded me. Make sure it speaks of grace. At first, it all felt overwhelming, like I was being reshaped from the ground up. But as the days blended into one another, something inside me began to shift. The awkwardness lessened. The movements grew natural. I no longer felt like an imposter in frills and bows. I felt like I had always been meant to move this way, to smile this way, to exist this way. One afternoon, Jessica caught me humming to myself while smoothing the skirt of my dress. She leaned against the doorway, watching with a tender expression I had never seen before. "You don't even realize it, do you?" she said. I paused, blushing. Realize what? You're not pretending anymore. Look at you. Look at how easily it comes now. Her words hit me with such force that I nearly cried. Because she was right. Somewhere in the quiet repetition of ribbons and lessons, I had stopped acting and started being. That evening, Aunt Martha gathered us in the sitting room. She lit a single candle and spoke in her calm, steady tone. "This journey will not always be easy," she warned. "The outside world may not understand. But what matters is that within these walls, you are safe to grow. And the more you nurture this self, the stronger it will become." I nodded, clutching the hem of my dress in trembling hands. Jessica squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "And we'll be here every step of the way." For the first time, I believed it, not just their words, but myself. By the 10th day, the house itself seemed to conspire in my transformation. The scent of lavender from Aunt Martha's freshly pressed linens, the faint jingling of wind chimes outside, the way sunlight streamed through lace curtains, it all felt like the backdrop to a story unfolding just for me. That morning, Jessica surprised me with a small package wrapped in tissue paper. Inside was a soft bonnet, pale yellow with white lace along the edges. My breath caught as I lifted it, the fabric light as a whisper. "A final touch," Jessica said gently, tying the ribbons beneath my chin once I had placed it on. "See how it frames your face? You look like innocence itself." My reflection in the mirror startled me. Each day had brought a new layer of softness, but this felt like the culmination of everything so far. The bonnet, the dress, the tights, the shoes, it all wove together into a vision I could no longer dismiss as temporary. Aunt Martha entered then, carrying a book bound in faded leather. She set it on the table and opened it to reveal handwritten notes, sketches, and clippings. "This is our family journal," she explained. "Each generation has contributed to it. Traditions, lessons, secrets. And now it is your turn." She handed me a pen, guiding my trembling hand to the blank page. "Write how you feel today," she urged. "Capture the truth of this moment, so you will always remember it." I hesitated, unsure where to begin. But as I stared at the page, the words poured out. I feel seen. I feel fragile and strong at the same time. I feel like I am finally meeting myself. Jessica leaned over my shoulder, reading quietly, then pressed a gentle kiss to the top of my head. "Perfect," she whispered. That afternoon, they took me once again to the garden. But this time, instead of lessons, they simply let me play. Jessica encouraged me to skip along the path, the petticoats swishing as I moved. Aunt Martha clapped softly as though I were a child at a recital, her eyes shining with pride. For once, there were no corrections, no expectations, just freedom to exist in this new self without restraint. As the sun set, painting the sky in pinks and golds, I sat on the blanket with my head resting against Jessica's shoulder. "Is this really me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Jessica didn't hesitate. "Yes. And you've only just begun." Aunt Martha's hand found mine, her grip warm and steady. "You're not becoming someone else," she said. "You're uncovering the person you always were." I closed my eyes, letting their words sink deep into my heart. For the first time, I no longer doubted it. The next few days blurred together, but each moment added another thread to the tapestry of my transformation. I grew accustomed to waking in soft fabrics, to Aunt Martha's careful guidance, to Jessica's playful encouragement. What once felt strange now felt like a rhythm I could no longer imagine living without. But on the 11th day, the mood in the house shifted. I noticed it first in the way Aunt Martha studied me during breakfast, her knitting needles paused in her lap. Jessica, too, seemed unusually quiet, her usual teasing smile replaced with something more thoughtful. Finally, Aunt Martha set her cup down and spoke. "It is time for trial," she said calmly. My stomach dropped. A trial? Jessica reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Don't look so scared. It's not a punishment, it's a test. We've sheltered you here, but now we need to see if you can carry this softness outside of these walls." My heart raced at the thought. The safety of the house had become my cocoon. Stepping beyond it in lace and ribbons seemed unthinkable. Outside? But what if someone sees? Aunt Martha gave a gentle smile. "That is the point, darling. Transformation is not only for mirrors and secret rooms. It must breathe in the world, even in small ways." Jessica's voice softened. "We'll be with you. You won't be alone." By afternoon, they had chosen my outfit, a pale lavender dress with puffed sleeves, white ankle socks, and polished Mary Janes. Jessica tied a matching ribbon in my hair, while Aunt Martha draped a light cardigan over my shoulders, just in case. The three of us walked down the garden path and out through the side gate. My pulse hammered with every step. Even though we were only going as far as the small park down the road, each sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of cars, felt magnified, as though the whole world was watching. Jessica held my hand firmly, her presence a steady anchor. "Breathe," she whispered. "You look beautiful. Nobody sees a mistake, they see someone shining." At the park, children played on swings while parents chatted on benches. I froze, terrified that every eye would turn toward me. But the world continued on, indifferent. A few glances drifted my way, but none lingered. To them, I was just another person enjoying the afternoon. We sat on a bench beneath a tree, and Aunt Martha handed me a biscuit from her bag. "See," she murmured, "the sky did not fall. You are still you, and the world is still turning." A strange lightness filled me then, a mix of fear and exhilaration. For the first time, I had carried my secret self into the open air, and nothing had shattered. On the way back, Jessica leaned close and whispered, "That was only the beginning. Next time, we'll go further." And though my nerves trembled, a small part of me longed for it. That night, long after the house had grown quiet, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed every moment of the outing, the cool air on my skin, the way the lavender dress swayed when I walked, the rush of fear when we first stepped outside, and then the strange calm when I realized no one cared. It was overwhelming to think that the world hadn't crumbled the way I had always imagined it would. When morning came, I found Jessica waiting in the sunroom with a mischievous grin. "Well," she said, "now that you've survived your first outing, it's time for something a little bolder." My heart skipped. "Bolder?" She nodded. "Aunt Martha agrees. It's important that you learn confidence, not just safety. Today, you'll not only step outside, but you'll also interact. Nothing dramatic, just small conversations. The kind that show you can exist in this softness without fear." I froze at the thought, but Aunt Martha appeared behind her, carrying another outfit folded neatly in her arms. This one was pale mint green, with delicate lace along the collar and tiny pearl buttons down the front. She placed it in my hands with a firm but kind smile. "Wear this and remember, presence is stronger than fear." Once dressed, I stood in front of the mirror, trembling. The mint fabric glowed softly against my skin, and the ribbon in my hair tied everything together. Jessica clasped her hands in delight. "Perfect. Now, let's put that grace to the test." We walked together into town, sticking to quieter streets. Every step felt monumental, my polished shoes clicking softly on the pavement. Jessica stayed close, her arm linked with mine, while Aunt Martha walked a little ahead with her steady, confident stride. Our first stop was the corner bakery. The bell above the door chimed as we entered, and the warm smell of fresh bread wrapped around me. My chest tightened. There were people inside, strangers. Jessica squeezed my arm. "Order something," she whispered. I swallowed hard and approached the counter, my hands shaking as I pointed to a small pastry. My voice came out softer than usual, but clear. "One, please." The woman behind the counter smiled, wrapped the pastry, and handed it over without a second glance. To her, I was just another customer. Nothing more. When we stepped back outside, my knees nearly buckled from relief. Jessica laughed softly, hugging me close. "See? You did it. Nobody doubted you. Nobody questioned." Aunt Martha nodded, her eyes proud. "You carried yourself with grace. That's what matters." The rest of the walk was easier. I began to notice how the sun sparkled on shop windows, how the breeze played with the ribbon in my hair, how free it felt to move without shrinking. By the time we returned home, I wasn't trembling anymore. Instead, I felt a quiet pride. A part of me had stepped into the world, and the world had accepted me, just as I was. That evening, as I wrote about the day in the family journal, my hand shook less than it had before. My words flowed more easily, and for once, they weren't filled with fear. They were filled with hope. The morning after our trip into town, I woke to a sense of anticipation rather than dread. It was a small but important change. My first thought wasn't what if I'm discovered, but rather, what new step will today bring? That shift alone made my heart feel lighter. When I came downstairs, Aunt Martha was already in the sitting room, her knitting basket at her side. Jessica leaned lazily against the mantel, sipping tea with her usual playful air. But when they looked at me, I saw it in their eyes. Something new was about to happen. "We've taught you to dress, to walk, to speak gently," Aunt Martha began. "But there is more to becoming than appearances. Today, we begin teaching you how to belong." I tilted my head, unsure. "Belong?" Jessica set down her cup and crossed the room to take my hands. "It's one thing to wear pretty clothes and behave sweetly. It's another to weave yourself into the world, to accept that you're part of something bigger. That's where true transformation happens." Before I could respond, Aunt Martha handed me a small woven basket. Inside were folded napkins, a jar of homemade jam, and a loaf of bread wrapped in paper. "We're going to visit Mrs. Winslow down the road. She's an old friend. She won't judge, but she will expect manners." My stomach fluttered, but I nodded. Each step forward so far had felt impossible until I took it, and then it became part of me. Maybe this would too. Jessica dressed me in a pale cream dress with little blue flowers scattered across the fabric, pairing it with white socks and a ribbon that matched the blossoms. When I saw myself in the mirror, I almost smiled without prompting. The girl I saw was no longer a stranger. She was me. We walked down the road, the basket swinging gently in my hands. When Mrs. Winslow opened her door, her face lit up with recognition at Aunt Martha and Jessica. Her eyes fell on me, and for a terrifying moment, I thought she might frown or question. But instead, she smiled warmly. "And who is this lovely little one?" she asked. My cheeks burned, but before I could stumble, Jessica answered smoothly, "This is our darling. We've been helping them find their way." Mrs. Winslow leaned down slightly, her eyes twinkling. "Well, aren't you precious? Come in, come in." Inside, we sat at her polished table while she poured tea. I remembered Aunt Martha's lessons, hands folded, back straight, voice soft. When Mrs. Winslow asked me a simple question about the weather, I answered politely, even managing a small smile. Her approval shone in her eyes. "Such sweet manners," she remarked. "Martha, you've done wonders." My chest swelled with a pride I hadn't known before. It wasn't just Jessica and Aunt Martha who saw me now. Others could too. And nothing terrible happened. On the walk home, Jessica squeezed my hand. "Do you see? You belong. Not just with us, but with the world, if you let yourself." The thought echoed inside me long after we returned, settling into the deepest part of my heart. For the first time, I wasn't just wearing a role. I was living it. That evening, the house was bathed in golden light as the sun sank low, painting the walls in warm shades of amber. I sat by the window with the family journal open in my lap, pen hovering over the blank page. My hand shook slightly, but the words poured out more easily than they had before. Today, I met someone outside of our little circle, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I was seen, and it didn't break me. I think I belong. Jessica peeked in quietly, her eyes flicking to the page before she smiled. You're starting to trust yourself, she said, settling into the chair across from me. That's the hardest part. Aunt Martha soon joined us, carrying a tray of steaming cocoa. She placed the cups down with deliberate care, then fixed her eyes on me. You've made great strides, she said, her voice steady but gentle. But there is one final test before I can say you're ready. I froze, the pen slipping from my hand. Final test. Jessica's eyes sparkled with excitement. Don't look so frightened. It's not what you think. Auntie believes that transformation isn't complete until you've faced a mirror of your old self and chosen which reflection to keep. I frowned, unsure what that meant. Aunt Martha reached into the knitting basket and drew out a folded bundle. My heart skipped when I realized what it was. My old clothes, tucked away since the day Jessica first opened the box of frills. She placed them in my lap. The fabric felt heavy and rough in my hands, so different from the soft dresses I had grown used to. Tomorrow, Aunt Martha said, you will put these on once more. Only then will you see clearly how far you've come. The thought made my chest tighten. The idea of stepping back into those old garments felt suffocating, like shackles waiting to close around me again. Do I have to? I whispered. Aunt Martha cupped my chin and lifted my gaze to hers. You have to choose, child. That is the difference between pretending and becoming. That night, I barely slept. The bundle of old clothes sat at the foot of the bed, a looming reminder of who I had been. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw both reflections, the boy I had always hidden behind, and the girl who had blossomed in lace and ribbons. The question gnawed at me. Which one truly belonged to me? When dawn finally came, pale and quiet, I knew the answer was waiting. I only had to be brave enough to face it. The morning after my choice, the house felt different. Or maybe it was me who had changed. Sunlight streamed through the curtains as though it were brighter than usual, carrying a warmth that seemed to seep deeper into my skin. I had put on the lavender dress again, and instead of feeling like a costume, it felt like a skin I had grown into at last. Jessica hummed as she brushed out my hair, tying a ribbon with almost ceremonial care. You shine brighter today, she said, her voice tinged with pride. Like you finally let go of holding your breath. I blushed, but didn't deny it. Something had shifted, and even Aunt Martha noticed as she entered the room carrying her knitting basket. She studied me with sharp, perceptive eyes, then gave a single approving nod. Now, she said, you are ready to give, not just receive. I tilted my head, unsure. Give. Yes, she replied, settling into her chair. For weeks, we have poured ourselves into you, teaching, guiding, holding. But transformation cannot only be taken in. You must now share your light, however small, with others. Jessica clapped her hands together in delight. I have the perfect idea, she exclaimed. The church down the lane is hosting a little gathering this afternoon. Tea, biscuits, nothing grand. A perfect chance for you to meet others, to let them feel your gentleness. The thought made my heart stumble. Meeting Mrs. Winslow had been one thing, an old friend of Aunt Martha's, kind and forgiving. But strangers? A whole room of them? I must have gone pale because Jessica squeezed my shoulders reassuringly. You don't have to speak much, she promised. Just be present. Sometimes presence alone is a gift. By midday, I was dressed in a pale yellow frock with soft lace at the collar, chosen by Aunt Martha for its brightness. She said yellow carried warmth, the color of sunlight, and that it suited the day's purpose. With white socks and shiny shoes, I felt like a walking embodiment of the morning itself. We walked together to the church hall, my heart pounding harder with every step. The sound of chatter reached my ears as we drew closer, laughter and clinking cups spilling into the air. My hands trembled, but Jessica's steady grip anchored me. Inside, the hall was filled with neighbors, men and women, young and old, all gathered around tables with teapots and plates of biscuits. My first instinct was to shrink, to retreat behind Jessica and Aunt Martha. But instead, I stood quietly, letting the room wash over me. At first, no one noticed me. Then a kindly older woman approached, smiling warmly. "And who might you be, dear?" she asked. I swallowed and managed a small curtsy, the gesture Aunt Martha had drilled into me. I'm staying with my aunt," I said softly. Her smile widened, her eyes crinkling with kindness. "Well, aren't you sweet? Come, have a seat." And just like that, the tension eased. No questioning, no suspicion. Only welcome. I sipped tea quietly, listening more than I spoke, but each time someone smiled at me, I felt a thread connecting me to them. For the first time, I wasn't hiding. As we walked home afterward, Jessica looped her arm through mine. "You see," she said gently, "you didn't just belong. You gave them something, your gentleness, your presence. You brightened the room without even realizing it." Aunt Martha nodded, her voice low but filled with approval. "This is the next stage. Not to disappear into yourself, but to be seen and still remain whole." That night, when I wrote in the journal, I realized my words carried a new strength. They weren't only about survival anymore. They were about sharing, about becoming part of the world rather than standing apart from it. The following days brought a subtle, almost magical shift in how I carried myself. Each morning, I woke with a quiet sense of purpose, knowing that the lessons of lace, ribbons, and posture were no longer exercises, but parts of who I had become. The dresses no longer felt like disguises. They were extensions of the self I had chosen to reveal to the world. Aunt Martha and Jessica continued their guidance, but now it felt less like teaching and more like companionship. Aunt Martha would correct my posture with a gentle touch, or adjust a ribbon with a quiet word of approval, while Jessica would tease me in the most playful ways, making me laugh until my cheeks hurt. It was an intimacy built not on secrets, but on shared discovery. One afternoon, Jessica suggested we host a small tea party at home. She prepared the sitting room with delicate china, soft music, and flowers arranged carefully in vases. "It's time for you to take charge of the space," she said, eyes sparkling. "Invite a few neighbors, manage the table, and let your grace be felt." My stomach fluttered with nerves. Hosting, speaking, being seen, each felt monumental. But when Aunt Martha gave me a reassuring nod, I realized that all the steps I had taken so far had prepared me for this. Guests arrived, kind neighbors I had seen at the park and church. They smiled warmly as I welcomed them, guided them to seats, and poured tea with careful hands. I remembered the lessons of posture, voice, and presence. My movements were deliberate, my words soft but clear. And as I watched the room, I noticed something remarkable. People didn't laugh, they didn't question. They responded to me as I had been learning to be. Jessica whispered from behind me, "You're radiating. Do you feel it?" I nodded, a flush rising in my cheeks. I did feel it, the quiet, profound power of being fully present in my softness, fully myself. Aunt Martha approached and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You've reached a point many never do," she said. "You've learned to move through the world as yourself, not as a shadow of fear or expectation." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blissful blur of laughter, tea, and gentle conversations. By the time the last guest departed, I felt exhausted yet invigorated. I had faced the world beyond the house and found it welcoming, not threatening. That evening, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the journey. From the timid, secretive self who clutched a frayed ribbon in a bag, to the girl who could greet strangers with poise and warmth, the transformation felt surreal, yet undeniably real. I realized that the change was more than clothing or posture. It was the courage to embrace the self I had always longed to see. Jessica peeked in once more, brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we continue, but never forget how far you've come. You're no longer just following lessons, you're creating them for yourself." And in that quiet moment, I understood fully. This was not the end of my journey. It was the beginning of a life lived openly, tenderly, and unapologetically as the person I had always been meant to become. The morning light spilled through the curtains, golden and warm, painting the room with promise. I rose from bed, dressed in a soft pink dress with tiny embroidered flowers along the hem, and tied a matching ribbon in my hair. For the first time, I didn't feel nervous or unsure. Each morning now began with quiet anticipation instead of fear. Jessica entered with a bright smile, carrying a small notebook. "Today," she said, "we celebrate how far you've come. But we also take one more step, your first solo venture into the world, without us guiding your every move." My stomach flipped, though not with dread. This time, it was excitement tinged with nerves, a feeling I had grown accustomed to in the best possible way. Aunt Martha joined us, her eyes soft but firm. "You are ready," she said. "Your confidence has grown from lessons to instinct. Now it must meet the world freely." We walked to the park once again, but this time Jessica and Aunt Martha stayed behind, watching me with a mix of pride and tenderness. My footsteps echoed softly as I ventured forward alone. The air was cool, filled with the scent of grass and flowers. Children ran past, laughing, but I noticed them only in passing. I was focused on my own presence, the way my dress swayed, the ribbon in my hair catching the light. I approached a bench where a woman was reading, and she looked up, smiling warmly.
"Good morning," she said.
"Good morning," I replied, my voice steady and soft. She patted the empty space beside her. I hesitated, then sat. For a while, we exchanged small talk about the weather, the flowers, the world beyond the park. It was ordinary, but to me, it felt extraordinary. Every polite gesture, every careful word, was a proof of how far I had come. Afterward, I walked through the park, allowing myself to notice details, the rustle of leaves, the sunlight on the petals, the gentle hum of life moving around me. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't anxious about being judged. I felt a quiet, radiant confidence. I belonged here, in this body, in this dress, in this self I had fought so hard to nurture. When I returned home, Jessica and Aunt Martha greeted me like heroes returning from a quest. Jessica embraced me warmly. "You did it," she said. "You truly did it." Aunt Martha's hand rested on my shoulder. "Every step you took today was a testament to your courage. You are no longer a student of transformation. You are its master." That evening, as I wrote in the family journal, I felt the words flow with ease and certainty. I am who I was always meant to be. I have faced fear, embraced softness, and stepped fully into the world. I belong here, and I will continue to grow. For the first time, I didn't feel like a work in progress. I felt whole. The following morning felt like a quiet celebration. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, warming the room in gentle waves. I dressed in a pale lavender dress, soft as morning mist, with a ribbon tied neatly in my hair. There was no rush, no nervous anticipation, only a calm awareness of who I had become. Jessica appeared, smiling as always, but there was a softness to her expression that made my heart swell. "Today," she said, "we do nothing but enjoy. No lessons, no trials, no corrections. Just you." Aunt Martha arrived shortly after, carrying a small tray of breakfast and her ever-present knitting basket. She set everything down with quiet care. "It's rare to see transformation reach its true end," she said, her eyes glimmering. "But you've done it. You've learned not only how to exist in this self, but how to thrive in it." We spent the morning in easy conversation, sipping tea, nibbling biscuits, and laughing together. I noticed the small ways my posture, gestures, and voice felt instinctive now. I didn't have to think about being gentle or graceful. It had become part of me. Each movement was natural, each smile authentic. Afterward, We walked into the garden, the sunlight warming our faces. Jessica twirled me gently, making my skirt swirl, and we laughed as I stumbled slightly, the sound of our joy filling the quiet spaces of the house. Aunt Martha joined, clapping softly, her eyes proud. "I can see it," she said, her voice steady but tender. "You are no longer a visitor in your own life. You belong fully to yourself." I stopped for a moment, taking it all in, the soft breeze, the delicate rustle of leaves, the warmth of the sun, the gentle eyes of those who had guided me. And I realized something profound. Transformation was never just about clothes, ribbons, or posture. It was about courage, trust, and the quiet decision to be fully oneself. Sitting on the grass, Jessica and Aunt Martha by my side, I felt a joy so complete it almost startled me. My reflection in the window shimmered faintly in the sunlight, and for the first time, I didn't see two selves, just one. Whole.
True. Mine.
That evening, we returned inside, and I carefully wrote the final entry in the family journal. I am who I was always meant to be. I carry my past with gratitude and my present with pride. I will continue to grow, fully and unapologetically. This is my life, and I belong here. As I closed the journal, Jessica hugged me from behind, and Aunt Martha rested a hand on my shoulder. No words were necessary. In that moment, the journey, with all its fears, lessons, and triumphs, had come to a gentle, radiant end. I was no longer hiding. I was becoming. I was home.